Severodonetsk has fallen. Here we are, take a look at it yourself. For once, every map, Ukrainian or Russian, concurs. We've been talking about the battle for weeks, and yet it collapsed so fast. 1 month ago, against his advice of his generals, Zelensky decided to send some of his last reserves, the foreign contingent and the Ukrainian special forces, to reconquer Severodonetsk, which is the capital of the entire Luhansk region. But in the end, for what purpose? Sacrificing some of your best troops for another PR stunt? Now don't get me wrong, on one end I can understand. These men are effectively light infantry. Since they don't have any army vehicles, they wouldn't be very efficient in open ground against tanks and artillery. They can only be useful in close quarters fighting. And in turn, the only place they could be of any use was the urban battle of Severodonetsk, and especially in the industrial zone. My problem was that it was too few too late. No way that these men could turn the tide. Either you go balls to the wall and you actually send in all your army to reconquer the city, or you don't. But they decided to go halfway. And because of that, it reminds me of this scene in The Lord of the Rings, when the king, out of desperation, sends his last cavalrymen to charge the well-fortified orcs. Certainly very noble, but militarily speaking, there's not a chance that they could have won the battle. On a side note, here, take a look at that from the Wall Street Journal. Ukraine orders its troops to withdraw from Severodonetsk. This is indeed a fact. Perfect. But yet, the media always finds a way for a quick jab at the Russians. I quote, giving Russia a small but symbolic victory. This is an opinion. Why did they have to add small? Compared to what? Also notice the picture they use as a headline. Notice the vehicle that these Ukrainian soldiers are in. Is it me or they're using a civilian city bus? But now according to the great and beautiful Washington Post, Russia will soon exhaust its combat capabilities. The Germans said the same thing from the moment they invaded the USSR, up until the Soviets stormed the Reichstag. Hi and welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news about the Russo-Ukrainian war. Here we cut the BS and talk about what the media doesn't tell you. As always, information changes by the hour, so if you have any new updates, just comment them below. If you're new to the channel, make sure to check out my Ukraine playlist so you don't miss anything I've said in the past. And since I'm talking about a sensitive topic, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to support me on Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Huge thanks to all my Patreons and welcome to the headquarters. The situation is critical. In all honesty, since the breakthrough at Popasna, the situation keeps deteriorating. This entire salient south of Lysychansk completely collapsed. At Zolote, Ukrainian troops that had vehicles managed to avoid the encirclement. But even then, there are not enough vehicles for everyone. Many used simple civilian cars. The drive was dangerous and many didn't make it through. Problem is, many units were left behind. Here you can see one of the most heartbreaking videos I've seen from the entire war. These men seem to be Ukrainian territorial defense. Just take a look at their faces. Truly tragic. Although many separate disorganized groups of Ukrainian soldiers managed to infiltrate Russian lines and escape the encirclement to reach friendly lines. After the collapse of the Khersk-Zolote pocket, an estimated 1,200 to 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered to the enemy. And according to the latest news, an approximate 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers are in Russian custody. I'm telling you, the situation changes very fast. In the past few hours, shock units of the Russian army broke through Ukrainian defenses west of Vovchyarivka, and with this push managed to occupy the eastern part of the very strategic Lysychansk oil refinery. At this moment, it seems the Russians are pushing north in two pincers. There is the wide pincer, with fighting reported near Spirne, and even at the village of Vernokamyanske, against a Ukraine task force made of units of the 25th and 24th Brigades as well as the 17th Detachment. Some reports go as far as to say that there is chaos in the streets of Siversk. There is some uncertainty as to how long the city could withstand if the Russians gathered enough forces to storm it. According to the latest reports, 5,000 to 7,000 Ukrainian reinforcements are on their way from Kramatorsk, but also from all the Ukraine positions north of Lysychansk. So a quick collapse of the city is unlikely. And using this momentum, it was reported that the Russians established 2 bridgeheads across the Severodonetsk. Now for the smaller pincer, it was marked with the Russian capture of Topolivka. Here's a little reminder for the new viewers. If Zolote falls or is abandoned, the situation for the defenders at Lysychansk might become critical. The worst thing would be if the Russians captured the town of Topolivka. There's also fighting at Maloryazantsev, in the area of the glass factory, and at the southern outskirts of Lysychansk after the Russian capture of Bila-Ora. Apparently the defenses of Lysychansk could be already crumbling, as fighting was reported near the Shakhtar football stadium. The small pincer is meant to narrow down the encirclement of Lysychansk and to squeeze Ukraine forces against the river. Meanwhile, the white pincer is meant to cut off all supplies, push as west as possible, and avoid getting bogged down at the industrial area. And like we said, the eastern part is reportedly under Russian control. The Ukraine defenses there could collapse any moment. At this moment, the only way for the Ukrainians to circumvent the Russian blockade is through little country roads that border the Severodonetsk River. But even then, the road is dangerous because it can be targeted by Russian artillery. Severodonetsk Situation Report. After the predictable collapse of the Zolote salient, the Ukraine command finally ordered its last remaining troops at Severodonetsk to withdraw across the river towards Lysychansk. Immediately after, Russian and LPR forces took over all the suburbs. The Russians also entered the much talked about Azot chemical plant. According to some reports, they still need a couple days to make sure that no more Ukrainian forces are on this bank of the river. The Battle of Severodonetsk was hard. This company commander of the Ukraine 503rd Marine Battalion claims that 80% of his men that started the war are either dead or with serious injuries. And since then, they've all been replaced by men with little to no training. And that's only one unit out of many others. According to French newspaper Le Monde, in Severodonetsk, it was an expected and organized retreat. An organized retreat? Really? I'm just wondering, how is that possible since? Number 1. The 3 bridges connecting the twin cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk were all damaged or destroyed. Heavy equipment had a hard time going back and forth. Number 2. The Ukrainians relied on small boats to resupply and transport its troops back and forth, like a small Dunkirk. And number 3, under the constant pressure of Russian units. But yet, it's true, they managed to pull back very fast. And with reason, you might ask, how did all the Ukrainian soldiers escape from Severodonetsk? First of all, in my opinion, in the past week or two, the Russians have probably withdrawn a lot of units that were stationed at Severodonetsk and repositioned them for the attack on Zolote and the southern outskirts of Lysychansk. That means that there were less Russian troops directly available to intervene in case of a Ukraine withdrawal. That's one possibility. But what's interesting is that this move could have been a response to the ongoing process of Ukrainian units withdrawing from Severodonetsk. According to a Special Forces Police instructor in Lysychansk who went by the name of Alexander, he didn't know the precise moments when the order to withdraw would come, but he said that he expected it soon. Some forces from his group had already left without waiting for an order from their commanders. And to add to this argument, the Severodonetsk River is low at this point of the year, so it can be crossed on small boats and even rafts. You could even swim across, and this could be done safely during the night. Thinking about 2,000 to 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers doing that is not that crazy. It was reported that most simply did so in small groups of 2 or 3. Since so many Ukrainian soldiers were already leaving Severodonetsk on their own, could it be that the Ukraine command just announced a retreat to make it appear as if it was planned, and that they still have control over what's happening? Little flashback from the Mariupol evacuation. There was also footage of a Ukrainian T-72B in the Azot area. I wonder what happened to all the armored vehicles. There are a lot of conflicting reports. Some say that the bridges were unusable, yet there's footage of vehicles crossing over. Some say that no heavy equipment could cross. Was it all abandoned? Question. Now, just like at Zolote and Severodonetsk, many Ukrainian troops are still stuck at Lysychansk, which is the last Ukrainian stronghold of the entire Luhansk province. Estimates vary, but people agree for 8,000 soldiers there. Now their situation is not that desperate because the Russian encirclement is not very tight. With relative ease, soldiers can make their way through to Seversk and then Bakhmut. Bye bye Luhansk. I think the debate on the Ukrainian side is option 1, whether or not to attempt a full-on sortie, a breakthrough from Lysychansk, or option 2, to stand and fight, hoping to hold the Russians long enough, while Ukrainians strengthen their positions at Bakhmut and at other parts of the front. Because of a stiff hierarchy, it became evident that Russian aviation is not very good at engaging moving targets. By the time a target is spotted and the information is relayed to the command, which has to approve the attack, the window of opportunity is gone. This allowed the Ukraine command to withdraw a lot of armored units from Lysychansk at the last minute. For example, here there's footage of Ukrainian tanks originally positioned in Lysychansk that are now in Bakhmut. And you might say, how do I know that they're in Bakhmut? With all respect, the Bro-Sint community can be creepy efficient. They found the exact position of these Ukrainian tanks, namely on the southern entry to Bakhmut, thanks to this sign here and all sorts of landmarks surrounding it. They also remarked that the picture was taken on the 22nd of June, simply by judging by the weather. Here you can see Ukrainian soldiers speaking a mix of Ukrainian and Russian, saying how they left Lysychansk and that they are now going towards Slavyansk. And they don't seem to be that bothered. This allows us to raise a question.
You don't ask the question. Don't ask questions.
With all the best Ukrainian troops pulled out of Lysychansk, how long can we expect the garrison of the city to hold? It certainly won't be a Mariupol 2.0, and at this rate it seems to be gearing towards a Liman 2.0. Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, is apparently unhappy that it took so long for the Ukraine government to accept the withdrawal not only from Severodonetsk, but all the way west towards Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. And according to the latest news, he allegedly told Zelensky about the impossibility to withdraw the entire Ukraine grouping at Lysychansk without significant losses, as this could be a repeat of the disastrous retreat of Ukrainian forces at the Battle of Debaltsev. But as you've seen, every passing day, every passing hour, the Russians are adding more pressure. For example, one unlucky column of vehicles tried to break through from Lysychansk to Bakhmut, but was completely destroyed by Russian aircraft and artillery. Ukrainian troops can still escape, but only in small groups. And this comes at a cost. Since they have to spread out, units lose their cohesion, and heavy equipment must be destroyed so it doesn't fall into enemy hands. Now, is the Ukrainian General Staff going to pick option 1, the sortie, or option 2, the last stand? There are pros and cons for each, but ultimately it depends how far the Russians will push their momentum. As of now, the Russians have not yet sealed the encirclement. On the Ukraine side, they said that some retreating units actually regrouped and reinforced the defense of the strategic oil refinery. But many other units did not even bother to do that and simply moved west towards Bakhmut directly. Sadly, it seems the trend is for a mass withdrawal in the way of a sauve-qui-peut. And using historical data of the past battles, it seems they're doing the same way as when they retreated in order, in an organized fashion from Hirsk and Zolote, aka the pull-out method. But as you guys know, it has to be done at the right moment. Timing is everything, or it can turn very messy. And in the end, it's absolutely not a foolproof strategy. Essentially what it does is that you have to segregate your army into 2 groups. Pull out the useful NATO 155mm artillery, all mechanized and armored units, while delaying the Russians as much as possible by sacrificing conscripts and Ukrainian territorial defense units. As a reminder, initially the territorial defense were a group of volunteers that people could join to avoid being drafted and serve only to defend their region. But with manpower shortages, the Ukrainian government put an X on this privilege and sent them to the front anyway.
When the one with the rifle gets killed, the one who is following picks up the rifle and shoots.
All the Soviet Union flashbacks. Here's a story of one of them, dating the 26th of June. You can find the full text on an Instagram page called Battles and Beers. I'll put the link in the description. In April 2022, my unit assembled for training. Everyone was happy to do anything they could while waiting for the training. But the training never happened. Most didn't get a chance to make even 30 training shots. We had 3 days training in combat engineering, even less for anti-tank and machine gun fighting. And with reason, they all started to get worried about being sent to battle without proper training. But their officers told them, chill out guys, t'inquiète, trust me bro, no one will send you guys to the front. He continued, at the same time, I've seen how officers were writing into journals hundreds of training hours that never existed. This miserable approach of the years of the USSR surprised me, but my thought was, this is the army, we're all in this together. We probably will have more training. We probably will have some more training very soon. I was wrong. We were recommended to watch YouTube videos and learn from there. Come on! Okay, hold on, Vladi. I'm looking. Bliat, Vladi, hold on, I have to YouTube. Okay, how to reload European howitzers. How to... Igor, put the bottle down. How to fire mortar. After a month of such training, we were sent to the front. Our battalion got into a real fight under heavy shelling, when the majority of men began to say that they don't know what to do and have no weapons. The threats of courts and jail were the only answer from the commanders. I'm a father of 4, but they told me if I didn't shut up, I would be left somewhere in the field. I wonder if the Ukrainian High Command knows about this. And I can't share similar stories for the Russians because it's so opaque. Nothing comes out, especially not in English. In the meantime, the Russians are also relying on territorial units. The government called for volunteers by removing any age limits and with a promise of a very good salary. Here you can see a convoy filled with volunteers from the Ural region. As far as I can see, 10 trucks with about 24 men each, roughly 200 men. But if you pay attention, they're all middle-aged men. There's very few young people. From what I've read, so take it for what it is. From what I've read, their task will not to be fighting on the front line, but it's to protect the rear of the Russian army by holding strategic positions like train stations, bridges, crossroads, but also by taking supporting roles like cooks or truck drivers, for example. This allows Russia to keep the regular forces on the front line and not have them spread out for nothing in logistics, labor work, or policing duties. But we can't ignore the fact that this also means they suffered heavy losses, especially in infantry, since now they're scraping every fighting age man of their army. What's the point? Another thing that many Ukrainian soldiers are starting to question is why they're even fighting for Donbass. In this report from the French TV network France Info, they claim that there's mistrust between Ukrainian soldiers and hostile Russian-speaking inhabitants of Lysychansk. They also claim that they're waiting for Putin's army and that they can't wait for them to arrive. I wonder how that leaked out. But what was really surprising was this video from this Ukrainian soldier stationed at Kramatorsk.
Отак, ребята, воюють за наших. От заходиш на українські території, а тут люди, знаєте, вам що кажуть. От на. О. Зе, зе.
І ждуть собі за них,
І ждуть нахуй. От і воюй, не знаю, що ж, блядь, що здадуть нахрен, блядь, зараз.
I don't know how to explain it, but I feel that a lot of the population remained silent for a long time. But now that they see where the wind is blowing, they're starting to get more vocal. What's going on elsewhere? Now I feel bad for bursting your bubble. But the Ukrainian offensive in Kherson is finito basta. Arrivederci offensiva. A bit like the much-awaited attack from Steiner.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Same goes for the Ukraine counteroffensive in Kharkiv. Apparently the Russians are putting pressure on this line, and they're at the outskirts of Kharkiv. I don't think that they'll capture the city, but this is it. Now there are talks about a major Ukrainian counteroffensive taking place near Vuhledar. And it's true, they managed to capture a couple villages and push the front line a couple kilometers. But I fear that the same will happen as before, because of the critical situation in Donbass. Even if the offensive is successful, units will be taken away from the offensive and transferred to northern Donbass. And that's how the offensive will simply stall. Apparently the villages of Pavlovka and Shevchenko are back under Russian control. And just like this article from the New York Times mentioned, and like I said many times, the reason Ukrainian offensives fall short is because of poor communication between units, which often end up fighting on their own. That's all I have for you today. Let me know what you thought of my analysis in the comment section below. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to help the channel grow, make sure to support me on Patreon or PayPal.